My mother called me at 2 in the morning, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. She said, "Priya, listen to me carefully. Someone is pretending to be me. Don't trust her. She's not me." I asked what she was talking about. She just kept crying and said, "Please believe me. No matter what happens, don't let her in." 20 minutes later, someone who looked exactly like my mother knocked on my front door. Same face, same hair, same gentle smile. She was wearing the blue kurta I bought her for her birthday. She called me Beta, the way my mother always does. She asked me to let her inside, but my real mother had just warned me, and I had to decide in that moment which one to trust. My name is Priya Sharma. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a physical therapist in Phoenix, Arizona. I live alone in a small apartment about 30 minutes from my mother's house. My mother's name is Kavita. She's 54, a retired school teacher, and the strongest woman I have ever known. She raised me mostly by herself after my father passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. His death broke something in both of us, but it also brought us closer together in ways I never expected. What happened that night tested everything I thought I knew about trust, about family, and about how far someone will go to steal another person's life. Not their money, not their credit cards, their actual life. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my stories. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from today. I love connecting with all of you. Now let me take you back to the weeks before that phone call, when everything still felt normal. In the weeks leading up to that night, my life had fallen into a comfortable routine. I was working extra shifts at the physical therapy clinic, covering for a colleague who was out on maternity leave. The days were long and tiring, but I didn't mind staying busy. Ever since my father died, I found that keeping myself occupied was easier than sitting alone with my thoughts. Work filled the silence that grief had left behind. My relationship with my mother had grown stronger since we lost Dad. We talked on the phone almost every single day. Sometimes our conversations lasted 5 minutes, just a quick check-in to say hello. Other times we talked for an hour about nothing important at all. She would share new recipes she found online. She would complain about her neighbors playing music too loud. She would ask me when I was finally going to meet a nice man and settle down. Normal mother things. The kind of conversations that seem small, but actually hold everything together. I treasured those calls more than I ever told her. After losing my father so suddenly, I understood that time with the people you love is never guaranteed. Every conversation could be the last one. So I made sure to answer her calls, no matter how tired I was, no matter how busy my day had been. That particular week had been perfectly ordinary. On Monday, I talked to my mother about a leak in her kitchen sink. She wanted to fix it herself, but I convinced her to call a plumber because the last time she tried to fix something, she flooded the bathroom. We laughed about it together, the way we always did when remembering her small disasters around the house. On Wednesday, we discussed our plans for Diwali. It was still 2 months away, but my mother liked to plan early. She wanted to make sure we had all the right decorations and that I requested the day off from work. She already had a list of dishes she wanted to cook, and she was debating whether to invite Aunt Mira from California to visit for the celebration. Aunt Mira is my mother's younger sister. They talk on the phone a few times a month, and Mira visits once or twice a year. She's the only close family we have left since my father's side of the family lives in India, and we don't see them often. On Friday evening, my mother called to tell me she was having dinner with some friends from her book club. She sounded happy, lighter than she had been in months. She said she would call me the next day to tell me all about it. Before she hung up, she mentioned something that I wish I had paid more attention to. "Priya, I have to tell you something strange. I've been getting these odd phone calls lately. Someone calls, asks me questions about personal things, and then hangs up before I can ask who they are. What kind of questions? Silly things. What time I wake up in the morning, whether I live alone, what car I drive. I thought maybe it was some kind of scam, but it feels different, more personal." I felt a small knot of worry form in my stomach. "Mom, that sounds serious. You should mention it to the police." "Oh, it's probably nothing. I'm being paranoid." "What about installing a security camera, just to be safe?" She laughed. "Priya, I'm a 54-year-old retired teacher living in the most boring neighborhood in Arizona. Who would want to watch me? I'm not interesting enough to stalk. I'm serious, Mom. If someone is calling and asking personal questions, that's not normal. Fine. I'll think about it, but I really think I'm just being silly. Then she mentioned something else, almost as an afterthought. She said someone had been in her backyard. She found cigarette butts near the fence behind her roses. But she didn't smoke, and neither did any of her neighbors. She assumed maybe some teenagers had been cutting through her yard at night. Mom, that's even more reason to be careful. Please lock all your doors and windows, and call me if anything else strange happens. Yes, Beta, I promise. Now stop worrying and get some sleep. You work too hard. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Priya. Talk tomorrow. I hung up the phone feeling uneasy, but I told myself I was overreacting. My mother was probably right. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever happened. The phone calls were probably just telemarketers or scammers trying to collect information. The cigarette butts were probably from bored teenagers. I convinced myself there was nothing to worry about. That was the last normal conversation I ever had with my mother. The last time I heard her voice without fear in it. The last time I didn't have to question whether the person I was talking to was really her. The next night, at 2 a.m, my phone rang, and everything I thought I understood about safety shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound of my phone ringing at 2 a.m. cut through my sleep like a knife. I was deep in a dream, something peaceful that vanished the instant I opened my eyes. For a moment, I just lay there, disoriented, staring at the glowing screen on my nightstand. My mother's name was flashing across it. My heart started pounding before I even answered because nothing good ever comes from a phone call in the middle of the night. I grabbed the phone and pressed it to my ear. Mom, what's wrong? The sound that came through was not what I expected. My mother was crying. Not just crying, but sobbing so hard that she could barely form words. I had heard my mother cry before, at my father's funeral, during the hard months after his death, but this was different. This was the sound of pure terror, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep inside when your body doesn't know how else to respond to fear. Priya, she gasped my name between sobs. Priya, listen to me. Please listen carefully. Mom, slow down. What's happening? Are you hurt? Do I need to call 911? No, don't. Not yet. Just listen. Something terrible is happening, and I need you to believe me even though it sounds crazy. I sat up in bed, my whole body tense. Okay, I'm listening. Tell me what's going on. She took several shaky breaths, trying to calm herself enough to speak. When she finally got the words out, they made no sense at all. There's a woman, Priya. She's been watching me, following me, and she looks like me. She looks exactly like me. I felt my brain stumble over her words, trying to process them into something logical. What do you mean she looks like you? Mom, that's not possible. I know how it sounds. I know you think I'm losing my mind, but I'm telling you the truth. Someone has been pretending to be me. She goes places using my name. She talks to people who think they're talking to me. And tonight, I saw her with my own eyes. Where did you see her? Outside my window, standing in my backyard. She was wearing my clothes, Priya. The green dress I wore to your cousin's wedding last year. And her face was my face. Not similar, not close. Exactly the same. A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of my apartment. I wanted to tell her she must have seen a reflection or a shadow. I wanted to explain it away with something rational, but the fear in her voice was so real that I couldn't dismiss it. Mom, maybe you had a nightmare. Maybe you saw something and your brain played a trick on you. I'm not crazy. Her voice turned sharp, cutting through the tears. I know the difference between a dream and reality. I watched this woman stand in my yard for 5 minutes. She looked up at my window and smiled at me, with my own face, and then she walked away like it was nothing. When did this happen? About an hour ago. I've been too scared to move, too scared to do anything except call you. Why didn't you call the police? And tell them what? That my clone is stalking me? They would think I'm insane. You probably think I'm insane right now. I don't think you're insane, Mom. I'm just trying to understand. She started crying again, softer this time. I don't understand it either, but I called to warn you because I think she's going to come after you next. She knows everything about me. That means she knows about you, about where you live, about our family. Mom, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because I need you to promise me something. If anyone comes to your door tonight claiming to be me, don't let her in. Even if she looks exactly like me, even if she sounds exactly like me, don't trust her. She's not me. Promise me, Priya. I promise. But Mom, I think I should come over there right now. No. Stay where you are. Lock your doors. Don't let anyone inside until we figure out what's happening. I heard something in the background of the call. A sound that didn't belong. A door creaking open somewhere in her house. Mom? What was that? Her breathing changed. I heard her gasp, a sharp intake of breath that told me something was very wrong. She's here. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Oh God, Priya, she's inside the house. Mom, get out of there. Call 911. I love you, Beta. Remember what I said. Don't trust her. She's not me. No matter what she says, no matter what she looks like, she's not me. The line went dead. I called back immediately. The phone rang and nobody answered. I called again. Nothing. I sent texts asking if she was okay, begging her to respond. The messages showed as delivered, but she never read them. I tried calling 5 more times over the next 10 minutes. Each time it went to voicemail. 20 minutes passed. 20 minutes of pacing my apartment, phone clutched in my hand, trying to decide what to do. Should I call the police? Should I drive to her house? Should I wait for her to call back with some explanation that made this all make sense? Then my doorbell rang. The sound of the doorbell froze me in place. It was almost 3 in the morning. Nobody visits at 3 in the morning unless something is very wrong. I stood in the middle of my living room, my phone still clutched in my hand, my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the door like it might tell me what to do. The doorbell rang again. Then a voice came through, muffled by the wood, but still clear enough to understand. Priya, Beta, it's me. Open the door. It was my mother's voice. The exact same tone, the exact same way she always called me Beta. I felt my body move toward the door without even thinking about it. Every instinct told me to open it, to let my mother inside, to hug her and make sure she was safe. But her warning echoed in my mind, stopping me before my hand touched the lock. Don't trust her. She's not me, no matter what she looks like. I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. The woman standing on the other side was my mother. Same face, same silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a low bun, same small frame and gentle posture. She was wearing the blue kurta I bought her for her birthday last year, the one with the delicate gold embroidery along the neckline. She was smiling softly, the way my mother always smiled when she saw me. Everything about her looked exactly right. Priya, please open the door. I drove all the way here because I was worried about you. It's cold outside. I pressed my hand flat against the door, feeling the wood between us. My brain was screaming that this was my mother, that I should let her in immediately. But something held me back. Something about the way she was standing there, so calm, so patient, when my real mother had just called me sobbing and terrified 20 minutes ago. Mom, why are you here? You called me crying and said someone was in your house. I know, Beta. I'm so sorry I scared you. I had a terrible nightmare and I got confused. I feel so foolish, but I couldn't go back to sleep, so I decided to drive over and check on you in person. Please let me in so we can talk about it. The explanation made sense. It was exactly the kind of thing my mother would do. She worried about me constantly, and driving 30 minutes in the middle of the night to make sure I was okay was completely within her character. But something still felt wrong. I couldn't identify what it was, just a feeling in my gut that told me to be careful. Mom, what's my middle name? She laughed softly through the door. Priya Anjali Sharma. Your father chose it because he said Anjali meant offering, and you were the greatest gift we ever received. Now please stop being silly and let me inside. The answer was correct. Every detail was right. I felt my resolve wavering, my hand moving toward the deadbolt. But then I remembered something, a story my mother told me every year on her wedding anniversary. A a story that only she and I knew because my father used to make her promise not to tell anyone else. Mom, what did Dad say to you on your first anniversary? The thing you always tell me about? There was a pause. It lasted only a second, maybe less, but I noticed it. A tiny hesitation before she answered. Priya, this is silly. I'm your mother. I'm standing out here in the cold at 3 a.m. because I love you. Please just open the door. She didn't answer the question. My real mother would have smiled and said that Dad called her his favorite mistake. It was their private joke, a reference to how they met when he accidentally spilled hot coffee on her dress at a train station. She told me that story every single year. She would never dodge the question. She would never hesitate. I stepped back from the door. You're not my mother. What are you talking about? Priya, look at me through the peephole. It's me, your mother, Kavita Sharma. My mother would have answered the question. She would have known the story about the coffee. The woman outside went quiet. Through the peephole, I watched her expression change. The gentle smile faded slowly, replaced by something flat and empty. It was like watching a mask slip, revealing a completely different person underneath. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. Her eyes lost their warmth. Her posture straightened into something harder. She no longer looked like my mother. She looked like someone pretending to be my mother who had just realized the performance was over. I backed away from the door and called 911 with shaking hands. I reported a suspicious person at my address and gave them my mother's address too, begging them to send someone to check on her. The operator asked me to stay on the line and keep calm. I tried, but calm felt impossible. The woman outside knocked again, harder this time. Priya, open this door, right now. Her voice was different, colder. The gentle tone was gone, replaced by something commanding and sharp. I didn't respond. I just watched through the peephole as she stood there staring at my door. Then I grabbed my phone and called Aunt Mira in California. I didn't care that it was midnight there. I needed help. I needed someone else to know what was happening. Mira answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Priya? What's wrong? Aunt Mira, I need you to call anyone you know near Mom's house. Her neighbors, her friends, anyone. Someone needs to check on her right now. I think she's in danger. Through the peephole, I watched the woman step back from my door. She stood there on my welcome mat, staring directly at the peephole like she knew I was watching her. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she smiled again, but this time, there was nothing warm about it. It was a cold smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that makes your skin crawl. She tilted her head slightly to one side, studying my door like she was memorizing it for later. Then she turned and walked away. No hurry, no panic, just a calm, steady walk toward the parking lot. I watched her climb into a dark sedan parked across the street, a car I had never seen before in my apartment complex. The headlights turned on and the car pulled away slowly, disappearing into the darkness like nothing unusual had happened at all. I stayed at the peephole for another 5 minutes, making sure she was really gone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The 911 operator was still on the line, asking me questions I could barely process. I told her the woman had left. I gave her a description of the car. I begged her again to send someone to my mother's house as fast as possible. The next 45 minutes were the longest of my life. I paced my apartment with my phone pressed to my ear, switching between the 911 operator, Aunt Mira, and my own desperate attempts to reach my mother. Mira had managed to contact one of my mother's neighbors, an elderly man named Mr. Patterson who lived 3 houses down. He agreed to walk over and check on her, but I could hear the confusion in his voice when Mira tried to explain why it was urgent. I was standing by my window, staring at the empty parking lot, when my phone finally rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered immediately. Is this Priya Sharma? The voice was official, professional, a police officer. Yes. Did you find my mother? Is she okay? Ma'am, we responded to the address you provided. We found a woman inside the home. She was in the basement, restrained with zip ties. She's shaken up, but physically unharmed. The paramedics are checking her now. I collapsed onto my couch, my legs giving out beneath me. That's my mother. Someone took her. Someone held her captive in her own house. We're going to need you to come down and identify her, ma'am. And we'll need to take a full statement from both of you about what happened tonight. I drove to my mother's house faster than I had ever driven anywhere in my life. The streets were empty at that hour, and I ran every yellow light without slowing down. When I pulled onto her block, I saw the flashing red and blue lights from 3 police cars parked outside. An ambulance was in the driveway with its back doors open. Neighbors had come outside in their bathrobes, standing in clusters on their lawns, watching the scene unfold. I parked crookedly on the street and ran toward the house. An officer stopped me at the edge of the yard and asked who I was. I told him I was Kavita Sharma's daughter. He nodded and led me toward the ambulance. My mother was sitting on the back bumper, wrapped in a gray blanket, a paramedic checking her blood pressure. The moment she saw me, her face crumpled and she started crying. I ran to her and threw my arms around her, holding her so tight I was afraid I might hurt her, but I couldn't let go. I needed to feel that she was real, that she was solid, that she was actually there. You believed me. She whispered the words against my shoulder, her voice hoarse from crying. You actually believed me. Of course I believed you, Mom. You told me not to trust her. You told me she wasn't you. I was so scared she would trick you. She looked exactly like me, Priya. Exactly. I don't understand how that's possible. It doesn't matter right now. You're safe. That's all that matters. She pulled back and looked at my face, her hands cupping my cheeks, the way she used to do when I was a child. How did you know? When she came to your door, how did you know it wasn't me? I asked her about Dad, about what he said on your first anniversary. My mother's eyes widened. The coffee story. She didn't know it. She tried to change the subject. That's when I knew something was wrong. My mother laughed through her tears, a broken sound that was half relief and half disbelief. Your father's favorite mistake. He would be so proud of you right now. Over the next several days, the police pieced together what had happened. The woman's name was Danielle Cross. She was 42 years old, a former makeup artist and actress from Los Angeles, who had moved to Arizona 3 years ago. She had suffered a severe psychotic break after her own mother died from cancer, and she had become obsessed with the idea of replacing someone else's mother, of becoming someone else entirely. She had been stalking my mother for 4 months. She studied everything about her routines, her mannerisms, the way she walked and talked and smiled. She collected photographs and videos and practiced imitating my mother's voice until she had it perfect. She used professional-grade prosthetics and makeup to transform her face into an almost exact copy of my mother's features. On Danielle's computer, police found folders filled with information about my family. She knew where I worked. She knew my daily schedule. She knew the layout of my apartment building. She had recordings of my mother's voice that she had practiced with for weeks, playing them over and over until she could match every tone and inflection. Her plan was to replace my mother permanently. She intended to kill Kavita Sharma, dispose of her body, and step into her life. She would become my mother. She would show up at family gatherings and holidays. She would call me on the phone and pretend to be the woman who raised me. And she believed, in her broken mind, that eventually I would love her the way I loved my real mother. The night everything fell apart, she had held my mother captive in the basement for 6 hours. She tied her up, gagged her, and left her in the dark while she drove to my apartment to test whether I would accept her as the real thing. If I had opened that door, if I had let her inside, the police said there was no telling what she would have done next. The weeks after that night were some of the most difficult my mother and I have ever faced. Danielle Cross was arrested 2 days later at a motel about 60 miles outside Phoenix. She had been hiding there, waiting to see if her plan had worked, still believing that somehow she could try again. When police found her, she showed no remorse. During questioning, she insisted that she was only trying to help me, that she would have been a better mother than Kavita ever was. She truly believed that replacing my mother was an act of love. She was charged with kidnapping, breaking and entering, stalking, identity theft, and attempted fraud. The psychiatric evaluation revealed severe delusional disorder that had been building for years since her own mother's death. The court determined she was not fit to stand trial in a traditional sense, and she was committed to a high-security mental health facility where she will remain for a very long time. I don't know if she will ever truly understand what she did. Part of me hopes she gets the help she needs. Another part of me never wants to think about her again. My mother couldn't stay in her house after what happened. She tried for one night, but she called me at midnight in a panic, saying she could hear footsteps that weren't there, seeing shadows that moved in ways they shouldn't. The trauma had seeped into every corner of that house. Every creak of the floorboards reminded her of being dragged into the basement. Every dark corner held the possibility of someone waiting. She moved in with me for the first 3 months. We shared my small apartment, sleeping in the same room because neither of us could bear to be alone at night. I would wake up sometimes to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, just making sure it was still locked. Other times, she would wake me up just to talk, to hear my voice, to confirm that I was real and that everything was okay. We both started therapy. My mother's therapist specialized in trauma survivors, and slowly, session by session, she began to process what had happened to her. She had nightmares for months. She would dream about waking up in that basement, bound and helpless, hearing footsteps above her head, and knowing that someone wearing her face was walking through her own home. Some nights, she would cry for hours. Other nights, she would just sit in silence, staring at nothing. But she got better. Slowly, painfully, she got better. We made changes to protect ourselves. We installed a comprehensive security system in her house before she moved back, with cameras on every entrance and motion sensors in the yard. We established code words, secret phrases that only the two of us would know, so we could verify each other's identity if anything ever felt wrong again. We agreed that if either of us ever called with an emergency, we would ask a specific question before trusting anything the other person said. Our relationship changed in ways I didn't expect. Before that night, I had kept a certain distance from my mother. I loved her deeply, but I was also protective of my independence. I visited on weekends and called every day, but I had built walls between us without even realizing it. Those walls came down completely after what we went through. I started having dinner at her house twice a week. We took a pottery class together on Saturday mornings. We planned a trip to India to visit family we hadn't seen in years. 6 months later, my mother finally spent a night alone in her house without calling me in a panic. It was a small victory, but it meant everything. She joined a support group for stalking survivors and found comfort in talking to people who understood her experience. She even started volunteering at a local shelter for women escaping dangerous situations. She said that helping others helped her feel less powerless. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together in her kitchen, she asked me a question that I've thought about many times since. What made you trust me, Priya? When she looked exactly like me, when everything about her seemed right, what made you not open that door? I thought about it for a long time before I answered. She knew the facts, Mom. She knew my middle name and who chose it. She knew details about our family, but she didn't know the feelings. She didn't know the stories that only matter to us. When I asked her about Dad's anniversary words, she didn't know what I was talking about. But more than that, it was the way she looked at me. What do you mean? She looked at me like she was studying me, like I was a test she was trying to pass. You don't look at me that way. You look at me like you love me, like you've loved me my whole life and you can't imagine ever stopping. That's what I saw missing. That's what told me she wasn't you. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the counter and took my hand. Your father used to say that love isn't something you can fake. You can copy someone's face and voice and mannerisms, but you can't copy the way they love. He was right. His favorite mistake. She smiled through her tears. That's what he called me, because he spilled coffee all over my favorite dress, and I yelled at him for 10 minutes, and then he asked if he could buy me a new one, and I said only if he bought me dinner first. And the rest is history. The rest is history. I share this story because I want people to understand that identity theft isn't just about credit cards and social security numbers. It can be so much more personal than that. Someone tried to steal my mother's actual identity, her face, her voice, her place in my life. And she almost succeeded because she did her research and she prepared carefully and she waited for the right moment. but she couldn't steal the one thing that actually mattered. She couldn't steal the love between a mother and daughter. She couldn't replicate the years of memories, the private jokes, the stories that only we know. She could look exactly like my mother, sound exactly like my mother, even move exactly like my mother, but she could never love me the way my mother does. And that difference, invisible but powerful, is what saved us both. Trust your instincts. Listen to the people who love you, even when what they're saying sounds impossible. And remember that real love can't be faked. It can't be copied. It can't be stolen. My mother taught me that love isn't about recognizing someone's face. It's about recognizing their heart. A stranger could learn to look like my mother and talk like my mother, but she could never learn to love me the way my mother does. And that love, that invisible connection between us, is something no one can ever take away. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and let me know if you have a special memory or code word with someone you love. Your stories mean the world to me. Stay safe out there, everyone, and call your mother today. Tell her you love her, because you never know when someone might try to take her place.